Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark from the United States.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Mark from the States. How are we doing today? I'm doing fantastic. Yes, good. I hope you are as well. Thank you so much to all of you for hanging out with me on Sunday who were able to make it. It was wonderful. Had such a wonderful time. Great weekend. It was a lot of fun. Of course, my youngest son turned 16. My oldest son got engaged. It's good times around my family right now. So we are very happy. Of course, Jennifer, my wife, she is very excited. She gets to plan a wedding, or at least help plan a wedding. And of course, all her friends are excited too because they want to help. So she's in good spirits. I love it. So it's just good. Yeah, I'll be heading to Vegas this weekend, so I'll be gone about 5 days, I believe. Today's video, 10 lesser known British inventions that changed the world. This is by Girl Gone Long and Kaylin over there. Great channel. Please go over. And this is so important. And here it is. Get over there and support her. It's really important. She is, if you don't know, she's an American who now lives in the UK, London specifically. And it's important that you get over there and support her channel, like, subscribe, do the things that you guys do to help her, because she has given us permission to learn from her videos and watch her videos. So it's important that we reciprocate the love and support her and spread the word on her channel to help her. Okay, so get over there. The links, I've created the links, so it's really easy. You just click them. There's one that takes you to her channel, and one that takes to this video. So if you want to watch this video without me, chatting through it, please get over there, and I encourage you to do that. It's really important that you go over there. She works hard, a lot of effort into making these videos, and I'm just blessed that she is given us the okay. So we need to get over there and help her out by supporting. So please, I know a lot of you actually probably already watch her stuff, because that's how I found out about her, is through all of you. So she's wonderful. Come sit on this big fake couch. We're going to talk about inventions, 10 lesser known inventions. I'm sure there's so many. I've gotten to the point now, after doing this channel, that I just assume everything was invented by the British. I remember when I first started, I was like, wow, you invented that? Oh, wow, that came from you? Wow, British invented that? Now I just assume everything that I enjoy in my life was at least invented in Britain first. Or a variation of it. The early variation of it. So yeah, it's gotten to that point. It's pretty amazing. The list is truly remarkable of the things that were created and invented over there. So pretty special. So let's see. These are 10 lesser known British inventions that changed the world. I'm sure there are so many more. I don't know how many. I may have heard some of these, but it's just, I love seeing these, because there's always maybe one or two that I didn't know about. So anyway, come sit with me on this big fake couch. We're going to jump out. Hey, now I'm in the small box, and let's get started.
If you haven't been living under a rock, and probably even if you have, you'll know that some pretty major inventions have come out of the UK. For instance, the World Wide Web, the steam engine, and even the chocolate bar. But this episode isn't about those. It's about the way more interesting stories of the inventions you probably didn't know were British. This is a video about fascinating things like linoleum, marine chronometers, and the modern torpedo. Let's get started. First up, linoleum. Everyone now hates linoleum because it's gone out of fashion, but honestly, everyone also once loved linoleum because it's awesome and easy to clean, and your grandma probably had it all over the house.
Oh, yeah.
This smooth floor covering is made from a mixture of linseed oil, flax, wood flour, cork, and pigments, and it's typically on a canvas backing and pressed between really heavy rollers. But this isn't a video about how linoleum is made, it's about who made it, and that was an Englishman named Frederick Walton. The year was 1855, and our pal Frederick had an oops moment when he forgot to seal a container of linseed oil. His bad, but also his good, because it went on to then make him very successful. When he returned to the container later on, he saw that a skin of solidified oil had formed on top of it. As he peeled it off, he wondered to himself in what way this weird rubbery substance could be used. By 1860, he had created a patent for linoleum, coming from the Latin word linum, meaning flax, and oleum, meaning oil. He had a manufacturing company set up in 1864 outside of London and basically ruled the linoleum exports for a while. But he
It's funny how I always chuckle to myself, not laugh out loud, but, like, not ha funny, but like, oh, that is so bizarre. How a lot of these inventions are by mistake or on accident, because in this case, he left the can open and discovered something. It's not like he went out looking for linoleum to create a floor, some sort of floor covering. It just kind of happened, and it's those things that are interesting, right?
also made another mistake when he didn't register linoleum as a trade name,
Oh, no.
meaning he lost a court case where other people were starting to sell different brands of linoleum. With that, it's considered to be the first product name that turned into a generic term. Next on my list are cat's eyes. Not the actual eyes of cats, but these
Cat's
things
eyes.
in the road that are reflective and help you stay in your lane when it's dark out. I had no idea what these things were called.
I call those bot dots. Bot dots. That's what I was told they were called. So I've just always used them. Or we call them reflectors. Reflector dots or road reflector or something like that. But bot dots is the name that I always used. Cat's eyes. Never heard that. And of course they're invented in Britain. Of course.
Until I researched for this video, and then I said to my husband, hey, you know those reflective thingies on the road? Apparently the British invented those. And he said, you mean cat's eyes? And I said, how do you know what they're called? And then I wondered if this was like a me thing or an American public schooling thing. Anyway, they were invented in the year 1934 by a man from Yorkshire named Percy Shaw. It's super simple, but Percy has saved countless lives over the years with this invention. He worked initially as a road contractor, so he was already a little bit more in tune with this sort of thing than your average citizen, but the idea came about when he was driving home from a pub late at night on Yorkshire roads and didn't realize he was very close to a steep drop on one side of the road until a cat who just happened to be sitting on a fence by the side of the road, allegedly, looked at his car and reflected his headlights back to him in the cat's eyes. At least this is the story that Percy told, so it could be 100% false, but he did come up with them and started to figure out how he could use a glass sphere to reflect the headlamps of cars. People weren't sold at first, and sales were initially slow, but then the blackouts of World War II started, and they realized that actually it's kind of dark out and we can't really see, so the Ministry of Transport started to make large orders, and the rest is history.
Wow.
Next, I bet you're wondering,
That's impressive. He saw a need. Whether or not the story is true, I don't see why we can't just take that story at face value. Why not? I mean, brilliant. Also, don't recommend driving home late at night from pubs. That could be a problem. Yeah, absolutely. Love it.
who in the world invented the hypodermic syringe? It's an interesting topic, actually.
thinking about
This is
that
what has
for
enabled the modern
years.
jab, or shot, as we say in America, and it's all down to a Scottish man named Alexander Wood. He studied arts and medicine in 1832 and established his own private medical practice in Scotland in 1839, but it wasn't until the 1850s when he came up with the hypodermic needle. There already existed a hollow needle, but he essentially added a plunger onto this and made the syringe glass, so now the doctors could see inside and be more accurate with dosages. He was fascinated with finding ways to relieve localized pain in people, which is a very noble thing to be fascinated by, unlike my fascination with watching true crime documentaries on Netflix, which helps literally no one. He did have sort of a competitor unknowingly. It was a French surgeon who reported a similar invention in the same year. But honestly, the French guy's wasn't as good because his was made of silver so you couldn't see inside of it, and he used a screw to push the medicine in, unlike the plunger. Plus, he tested on sheep while Wood tested on humans to make sure it really worked. So the Frenchman didn't get credit, and Alexander Wood has gone down in history. Next on my list is something very modern, the iPod. But Steve Jobs created the iPod, you might be saying to yourself. And that's true, but there's also more to this story. There's a man called Kane Kramer, who is still involved in the world of British inventions, and he developed the first digital audio player in 1979. It was only capable at the time of playing 3.5 minutes of music stored on a chip, but you can see from the design here and how close it is to the original iteration of the iPod. Unfortunately, he had to let the patent expire around 1998 due to a lack of funding, and while Apple did acknowledge his original design in court cases in later years, Kramer never really got anything out of it and is quoted as saying, "To be honest, I was just so pleased that finally something that I had done, which has been a huge success and changed the music industry, was being acknowledged." The next British invention on my...
Well, if that's true, he's a better man than myself. I'd be pretty bitter. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars he missed out on. Let's be honest, Steve Jobs didn't invent anything. He hired a bunch of people that created all that stuff. But he did have the vision, I guess. That's Mr. Kramer. Thank you.
My list, which is quite the departure from what we've been over so far, is the modern torpedo, the weapon you use to detonate enemy ships. An English engineer, Robert Whitehead, wasn't the only one who had attempted to work on the torpedo design, but he, along with a man named Giovanni Lupus, an officer in the Austro-Hungarian Navy, made the best advances and thus went down in history for this invention. Robert Whitehead had been involved in engineering since the age of 16, starting as an apprentice in Manchester and then eventually traveling to France and Italy to work as a marine engineer. Now, Lupus, on the other hand, had spent time trying to develop waterborne weapons, including a floating torpedo that was powered by a clockwork motor, but his was unreliable and honestly way more dangerous than anyone was even comfortable with, so Whitehead tried to perfect this model and ended up creating a driverless underwater missile that would detonate on impact. The Lupus Whitehead torpedo, created in 1866, was much more practical and safe for use, until it gets to its final destination, and he kept refining it until sea services around the globe started adopting it. Sadly for Lupus, he signed a contract with Whitehead that allowed for Whitehead to have the rights on future sales of the torpedo, and Whitehead became very wealthy and got to add the torpedo to the list of British inventions, while Lupus apparently died relatively bitter, but that's why you think twice about what you sign. Next up, sticking with the marine theme, is the marine...
You hate to see that, but yeah. God, see, everybody needs a lawyer in their family to be able to say, hey, you should probably let me read that first.
Chronometer. This is one of those things that will make you glaze over if you dive too deep into it, which wasn't an intentional pun, but we're leaving it in the script because it's dumb. So a marine chronometer, for those of you who don't know, which I'm sure which is none of you because we're all up on the latest marine chronometer news, is a navigational tool that is carried on a ship to determine longitude. It does this by comparing Greenwich Mean Time with the time at the current location found from observing celestial bodies, obviously. It was incredibly important and a huge technical achievement in its time because ships needed effective navigation for long sea voyages. And that technical achievement was created by none other than John Harrison, an English carpenter and clockmaker. There was actually a financial reward offered for someone who could come up with this invention because there had been quite a few naval disasters that British Parliament did not want to repeat. So they offered up to £20,000 in the early 1700s, an equivalent of almost £4 million these days. Unfortunately, John never saw a lot of this money for political reasons, but he did go down in history as the creator of the marine chronometer. Honestly, he probably would have chosen the money, but we can't change that now. Now, John was another Yorkshire man originally, and he built and repaired clocks in his spare time. It took him about 30 years of refining and testing to really succeed at the marine chronometer, and this was a feat that many scientists, including Isaac Newton, doubted could ever be built. Harrison had to come up with something that was going to be accurate over long intervals at sea without adjusting it, as well as something that wasn't affected by variations in temperature, pressure, humidity, and the constantly moving ship, obviously, as well as sea salty air. Eventually, he did it and earned himself and the marine chronometer a spot on this list of great British inventions. Next on our list is something far.
She says you glaze over. Yeah, of course, to a lot of people, the chronometer probably is an interesting topic, but and she's hilarious. Can we give credit where credit is due? She's hilarious. Real important though, especially at that time. To be able to have that sort of measurement of time and the adjustment of where you're at in the world and stuff like that. Just pretty, it blows me away that people way back then are thinking, have the ability to create these things. It's just without the use of computers and all that stuff. It's wild. It really is. And of course, a seafaring nation. Like the British are. Of course, they're going to come up with something like, they're going to be the ones to have. It was already written in the cards that it was going to be someone from Britain to come up with something like this, right? You're an island nation. Of course, you're going to have the invention. So it's not shocking. But I believe I think I've done a video many years ago that mentioned this, so it does sound familiar.
Far more simple. The tin can. This is an interesting one because the British man, Peter Durand, who was a merchant, received the first patent for the idea of preserving food using tin cans around 1810. But in the patent itself, he specifically mentions that the idea for this was communicated to him by a friend from abroad, which turned out to be a French inventor who actually came up with it. But the French inventor had only experimented with small food volumes, and Durand envisioned a much larger scale production. Durand's patent was also specifically for the preservation technique of using tin cans for food, and he has retained the credit for the first tin canned food patent. So technically, this is a French invention that the British came along and made better and put into large-scale use, so it's included in this list. Moving along, let's talk about...
And that just falls back on because the tin can was used to store food, right? And preserve food on voyages. There's the seafaring nation connection again. So yeah. That does not surprise me. What did surprise me that maybe it was a Frenchman who was thinking of the idea or something like that. However that played out. But yeah, can you imagine tin cans? No tin cans. Pretty revolutionary when you think about it. Gosh, it changed so much to be able to preserve food for long periods of time.
About synthetic dye. Until the mid-1800s, dyes came from natural sources like minerals and insects. But in 1856, an 18-year-old Englishman called William Henry Perkin accidentally came up with the first synthetic dye. It was a brilliant purple color, and it happened because he was trying to find a treatment for malaria during his Easter holidays from college. Side note to those of you still at school, stop scrolling TikTok and do something more useful. He was doing an experiment with coal tar, and while the experiment failed, and I really don't completely understand the experiment because I'm not that smart, he realized that the oily residue left over would stain silk. Now, his purple dye changed manufacturing history, and he immediately was like, let's let someone else find the treatment for malaria. I'm riding this wave, so he applied for a patent and helped to establish the modern chemical industry. He retired at the age of 36 and then just enjoyed carrying out research in other areas of chemistry. Second to last on our list is float glass. Float glass is a sheet of glass made by floating molten glass on a bed of molten metal, and it gives the glass a very uniform thickness and a very flat surface. Modern windows are usually made from float glass, making it a very, very important invention. And who was the man behind it? He was an Englishman named Alistair Pilkington, born in 1920 and educated in Cambridge. He gained a degree in mechanical science after the war ended and joined a company called the Pilkington Brothers in 1947, which funnily enough had no actual relation to him despite having the same name. He came up with the idea of float glass in 1952, it was announced to the world in 1959, and it quickly became the most popularly produced form of glass around the world due to its high quality with no additional polishing required and easy ability to shape it. You can use it in automobile glass, mirrors, windows, as I mentioned, furniture like tables, and so much more. Finally, let's talk about the ATM or cash point.
Can we all be honest and say no one ever looked at glass and said, I wonder who invented that? I have to admit that I never did. I never knew it was called floating glass even. That's wild. That someone says, I'm going to come up with glass. Not just glass, because that was already there, but floating glass. So you can shape it and use it for other things. That's pretty wild. Can't say I've ever even imagined or even thought who was behind that. But the fact that it was a British man, of course. That's my answer for everything. I wonder who came up with that. And I'll just instantly say it was probably a guy from the UK somewhere. ATMs, I knew this.
There are actually two Scottish men that claim the credit, and this is kind of a source of dispute. The first man is named James Goodfellow. He first patented automatic cash machines that used PIN numbers in May of 1966, more than a year before the first machine was ceremonially opened. But the machine that was opened in 1966 was developed by a man named John Shepherd Barron, who was born in India to Scottish parents. Shepherd's machines beat Goodfellow's machines by only 1 month, but he then became known as the man who invented the cash machine. However, they were different systems. The Shepherd machine didn't use cards like we use today. It used checks. Goodfellow's machine, however, used the card and pin system that we recognize today, and he claims to be the real inventor of the cash machine, which is more widely accepted today, as his was really the forerunner for what we use now. Goodfellow, unfortunately, did not own the rights or get rich off of the invention, and Mr. Shepherd Barron received an OBE in 2005 as the inventor of the automatic cash dispenser. But Goodfellow received an OBE in 2006 for services to banking as the patenter of the personal identification number. And to bring this back around to my experience, because somehow there is a connection here, when I was studying for my Life in the UK test, James Goodfellow came up as the man credited for inventing the ATM or cash point, so clearly we know where the UK government stands these days. That brings me to the end of this video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Please go and support her. So important. I did know there was a couple of Scottishmen were involved with the ATM. I couldn't remember their names, but I haven't been to an ATM in quite a while. I don't even go to my bank hardly ever. Everything's so digital. But just some of those inventions I would have never even have thought of. But even if you were to say, this coffee mug, who invented the coffee mug? I'm gonna say it's the British, because they probably invented something like this for tea, and then we're just adapting it for coffee. Who invented, you can go on the flashlight. I'm sure it was the British? You know, whatever. Whatever it may be, my first answer is always the British. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. So, thank you to you and all of your history and helping my life to be better. Cat's eyes. I love that. And I hope that story is true. The torpedo, that makes sense. Anything that has to do with ships, I'm just going to assume it came from you easily. The chronometer and the tin cans even, preserving food. You know, a lot of that stuff is super important. And so, yeah, love the video. Please go support her. Kaylin does a lot of work on her videos, so it's really important that you get over there and support her and her channel. Like I said, the links will be below. She is very funny. She is very funny and just a wonderful person. So get over there, support her, please, please. Hope everybody's happy, healthy, and safe. Thanks so much. We'll see you in another video here pretty soon. All right, take care. Bye.
Mark from the States, Mark from the States, it's Mark. And